Before we get started on the construction validation, are there any questions that have been burning people to ask before we get started so I can touch on those topics when we go through? So if there are any opening questions, please, the floor is open. Um, okay, sounds like no questions. I'm not seeing anything on chat, so I will start to share my screen. And I will pull up the datasets in Scene. Now, did everyone successfully download the datasets and were they able to get to this point here? Okay, great. Um, so this is the an introduction to construction validation or construction QA/QC processes using the Rithm apps. Now, a few of the advantages or selling points, as I call them, for these Rithm apps and these offerings are the rapid results that you can get in the field and the single scan workflow that makes these so rapid and gets you data in the field very quickly. Um, because a lot of the struggles that happen with teaching people point clouds is the registration. When you can eliminate that by only taking a single scan, everything becomes much more efficient, much easier. People can get to deliverables quicker, and we sell more scanners. So if you can just hit on the fact that these are rapid results and using only a single scan, I've seen lots of customers been very receptive to those little facts. And just some tips now when working with the Rithm apps. Um, because it's but just described the single scan workflow, if you apply a distance filter, say something around 100 feet when processing the single scan, you end up doing all of the editing or eliminating of data that you would do by hand with the polygon or lasso tools. Now, these three individual scans, I did some more touch up by hand to make them look nice for the AEC workshops that are coming up. But when you're doing a demo, throw on a 100-foot scan filter if you plan on using the 100-foot scan filter if you plan on using the Rithm apps, and that'll clean up the single scan real nice and allow you to jump right into using them. Okay, just checking my notes. So with those tips, on the left here, we've got some viewpoints, and we're just going to work our way from top to bottom. I know you guys are familiar with Scene and can navigate your way through, but these viewpoints are really going to help in the workshops because navigating, in my experience, people have gotten lost just navigating. So this will help out a lot. So I've got these contextual views because personally it helps me to see the larger picture before jumping in. So right click on ADA context and activate. Flies us right into a single scan that John Parker did in front of his house. And this is just the road running in front. We got a few homes and driveways and sidewalks that we will be running these ADA Americans for American Disability Act standards and laws and inspections that we'll be checking for on these sidewalks. So now we'll jump right click on ADA view and activate. And we want to open up the inspector app. All right. And then we'll go to the ADA icon. And the simplest tool to start off with, actually, I want to start off and explain the settings. So if we click on the settings icon, a settings window appears. And I'll start with the general tab in the upper left. These colors, such as text, connectors, locations, out of tolerance, this is the color that will appear on screen for each of these pieces. The point search radius Now, if you were to click, now I'll go to this corner here in the driveway, and you can see that there are some good gaps between spaces. If you were to click in that gap, this point search radius would look 0.17 feet away in all directions to look for the closest point. And you can control that here. This is the units that are decided to display. And when you create reports, this is where they are all run. And then also the display text and display size. Now if I jump to the ADA ramp tab at the top, I don't really have a great way of describing additional interval or spacing, but when those are kept at 1, that's when I get the most effective results. And when I change those, it can get a little bit screwy. I wish I had a better way of explaining what they are, but I don't really know them myself, but just keep those at 1. The sanity check here will ignore results that are above 5 degrees. So you can set that to anything lower. I would like this to say, ignore results instead of sanity check. But then we get to the other ones here, and these are a little more self-explanatory. When we create these long runs, we're going to have cross slope intervals every 5 feet is what I've chosen. The length of those cross length will be 2 feet displayed in degrees. And then again, some more self-explanatory settings. The max slope, which is similar to the sanity check, 5 degrees. Anything beyond that will display in red. Again, maximum cross slope of 2 and max rise of 1 foot, and the increment here as well. And then jumping over to FFFL, these are some self-explanatory settings. The density of points per is something that I get, well, some are self-explanatory. This is one that I have yet to understand again. But then you can choose the color that displays, a height sensitivity, so when doing an FFFL run, it'll ignore anything above 0.83 feet, and the number of graphs per page. That's a report option, and how densely you want the graphs to be on your report. And you'll see these enacted later. Okay, so I've gone through these settings. Now I want to go to the ADA icon, and the simplest option is the single slope, let's see here, tool. So the Rithm apps are great that once you finally selected a tool, it gives you a little bit of direction in this window up top, and just click 2 points to calculate a slope. If you can follow me here, I'm gonna click on some points on this driveway, and immediately it gives us a slope of 4.77 degrees, and it gives the arrow pointing the direction. You can also go uphill as well. And then I'll do some just cross slopes, and feel free to just make some slopes and see what kind of results you get with the single slope tool on this driveway. Are there any questions? I know we're just now getting started, but any questions from anyone out there? Anyone need help catching up to this point? Okay, I'm going to continue then. So now that we're here, another little tip that I'd like to show you for the Rithm apps. We all love and miss our edit undo, the classic Control Z once we're inside of scene. We can't really use that, but the Rithm apps do take control, and if I were to do Control Z, the last measurement that I took disappeared really quickly. Now I could do this for the rest, and I'll do it for the second one, but the second always tends to be a little bit slower. Let's see here, reset. This one will kind of load for a little bit, but it's nice if you make a wrong measurement or a wrong slope, you can just hit Control Z, and instead of erasing all your work, it only takes away the last measurement. And just another tip for the Rithm apps. So that's the single slope tool. It's the easiest, most self-explanatory, and an easy way to just start taking slopes. I'm going to deselect that, And the next one I want to go to is yeah, we want to use the ADA, and we're going to go to this ramp tool here. And the ramp tool, again, following the directions, create a line in the direction of the ramp going downwards. I've found that it works also going in the uphill direction, but I'm going to select 2 points on this sidewalk here. I want to keep it to the middle, one at the top here, one at the bottom, and then all you have to do is hit enter, and it'll process a little bit, and it'll give us slopes in the direction of the run and cross slopes as well. And then when this is finished processing, I can pull up. Now it's difficult to see. I'm going to move in a little bit closer here. Again, it's hard to see with the color photos being applied. I've tried different color options, yellows, reds, blacks, and this is the one that works. Green works best for me. But what we can see here is numbers on bottom are the measurements of the cross slope, and the number on top is the measurement down the line of the slope. So we can change those if you go to Settings and then the ADA ramp tab. And here are what I reviewed earlier. We can change that interval length. Right now it's at 5. If we wanted to be closer, let's say every 2 feet. And the cross slope length I'll just leave again as 2 feet, show it in degrees. But now if I want to, let's change this max cross slope. And you guys may be able to inspect your own. And I'm seeing what I've got here is 0.15, 25, 33, 36. So let's, and then 0.58 degrees there at the bottom. If I were to change this to say zero point 0.4, now anything above zero point 0.4 has been turned to red, and that indicates that it is outside of tolerance and needs to be fixed. Again, if we go to our settings, yeah, you can change the max cross slope again. I think the industry standard or the ADA legal cross slope, I believe, is 2 degrees. So I'll change that back to 2, and you can see everything jump back to green, and it's inside of tolerance. Now, a fun thing, not reports aren't fun, but after creating this slope analysis, if you click on Report and then jump over to the ADA tab, you can see that it has cross slope measurements and downslope measurements. And if you grab the screen on the right and you're able to move it around, you can hit the screenshot button here, and that will take a screenshot of what you're viewing, and that will apply it to the report if you hit Create Report here. So this information will now be saved as a PDF, and it'll be put on the desktop. So here's a report of our cross slopes, and it gives us pictures and pass-fail. If I had left that at the 0.4 or 0.5, these would some of those would appear in red. But here's a nice report that can be quickly created and archived for your ADA inspections. Any questions on the ADA ramp, navigating, or the reports so far? I get a little nervous when I don't hear anything. But I guess no news is good news, right? I believe it's 2 degrees or 2.5 degrees is the ADA compliant cross slope for sidewalks. Let me take a note here so I can get that exact number and email it to everyone here so we're not talking about wrong cross slopes when ADA conversation is about. So, but I believe it's in the area of um, I believe so. That's the slope. Yeah. the direction of the slope needs to be less than 5, so the ADA ramp itself, and then the cross slope at 2.5 degrees max or 2 degrees max for water flow. But those are very important numbers that I should confirm and then send out to everyone. Thank you, Sean, for bringing that up. Very important. All right. So we've didn't done the single slope measurement, the cross slope, and now I'll jump back to the ADA view. Another tool is the slope grid. Now there's no settings menu for the slope grid, but what happens is when you select it, the settings menu for it kind of appears, and you get the options for tool length, grid, minimum and maximum, and then which directions it goes. So if you see this little compass wheel, we're going to set up a grid, and it's going to take slope directions in all of these directions around each point. Now, what's important to remember here is that you don't need to, but for organization and visualization, it's important to have tool length be less than your grid spacing, because then if your tool length is longer than your grid spacing, you're going to have overlapping measurements. And you'll see after we create the grid here, even from this zoomed out view without overlap, it can be a lot to look at and confusing. So the one key here is to keep tool length shorter than grid. Again, these are your minimums and maximums for slopes, -2 to 2. I believe I had 0 in there once when I was doing some work, and that screwed up a lot of results. So make sure to keep a negative and positive number. We'll keep the grid aligned relative to the grid, and we'll just hit the next button here. And again, we get just a little bit of instruction underneath the window. And it tells us to begin by identifying the corner of the grid. So what we're going to do is pick out 3 corners of our grid. And you can pick high, low, left, right, anywhere. I like to start upper left, just like a book. And you can see it drops a very, very small point. And if we zoomed in closer, this is like an iridescent cone. But there's the first corner of our grid. You can now go to the right and mark the other corner, or you can go down lower. Either way, just mark the other corner of your grid. We now have spacing that we set every 4 feet. And then I'm going to go down. You can see behind this window, it's tough to see, but you've now created a grid of points. I'm satisfied with that, so I'll hit yes. It's going through, it's doing some calculations, and what you'll see here is a mess of slope measurements that will appear. And it's only a mess because I'm so far zoomed out. In just a moment, I'll show you how to make sense of it. And just reiterating the tip I gave earlier, when I was running this analysis after creating a project point cloud, this might have taken 5, maybe 10 minutes. So it was out of the question to run this analysis on a project point cloud and work only in a scan point cloud for the Rithm apps. So we can see that all these measurements kind of look like a mess, as I had called it earlier. But if I zoom in a bit, you can now start to make sense. So from this point, we've got a lot of different slope measurements in all different angles. I know I said earlier this doesn't have a settings menu, but if we go to settings and the ADA ramps, we can again change this real time to make it more visually pleasing by taking away the display numbers or not, showing those, and we can show or hide the passing measurements, and that way when you zoom out, it makes a little more sense to look at, and you can make your inferences on the data quicker. So I'm going to go back and show the measurements and display the numbers again. And this is the grid of slope grid tool. So these are all something that can be shown to your concrete contractors and do some ADA inspection. So that's the ADA portion of this. Any questions before moving along to floor flatness and floor levelness? Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's taking it a step further than anything I've done. But for me, this is a fast and digitized way of the single slope measurement. This is a way to get large areas and get a what do I want to say here? A constant and uniform technique for measuring slopes of large areas instead of just taking that single slope measurement and going to town. But yeah, this is another way. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, you got the idea, Sean. So we're going to jump now from the ADA inspection and to the floor flatness and floor levelness. So by right-clicking on FFFL context and hitting activate, we now can see that I took a single scan here of a hotel construction that's happening in northern Colorado. We got a nice crane and some scaffolding. I thought this would be a good scan for people to see in the workshop. And we'll jump now to the view and activate the FFFL view. And again, we'll open up Inspector. And one of the tips in Rithm, if you go to Edit, and I'd been working before, and you can see these are all the different layers I had been working on previously. The broom icon will clear them all and give you a fresh slate to work with. So I'm going to erase all the work that I'd been doing last night and this morning, just so I can get a fresh start here. And that's the broom icon under Edit. So this was this isn't freshly poured concrete, but this is cured, and they were actually working on the other half of it, flattening it out. But to get started, you just hit the floor flatness icon here. And again, it gives us just some directions. And you want to start by creating a line and identifying 2 points. So this is the part where I want to tell you that the proper FF and FL measuring technique is to try and parcel out your area into squares. You can see here we've kind of got a panhandle that reaches off to the right. So I'm going to isolate just this main square that we're looking at. And what I was told by one of the technicians for FF and FL is that you want to create a hashtag pattern or the pound sign. So creating 2 lines and identifying 2 points. I'm going to work my way vertically first. And then make sure to get the other direction as well. Now you can see that there are these, it's not like necessarily a ridge, but this is a little gap that they created in the floor. And we've also got some pipes sticking out and a little platform here for probably a post. These are just pieces of, pieces that you want to avoid when laying out a line. So keep that in mind when making your runs. And again, if you didn't like that last run that you put down, Control Z will take it away without erasing all of your lines. Now it may take just a moment here, but if you've drawn out, say, dozens of lines and you don't want to erase them all, just Control Z will eliminate that last one. So I'll replace it now. And now that we've got our lines written out, actually, again, here's another tip. If you read the instructions underneath the window, by holding the Shift key, it'll recreate a parallel line of the last one that you created. So since this bottom one was my last, if I just hold Shift and make sure to avoid this pillar and what seems to be this little bit here, I can just start now creating lots of really quick parallel lines by holding Shift and clicking. And again, I'll create one more vertical, hold Shift, and then there's two more really quick lines. So we've created this great grid. We've covered a lot of area on our parceled out section. Following the instructions underneath the window, just press Enter, and it'll double check, make sure we want to run the analysis. The analysis doesn't take that long to run, so I don't know why it asks you if you're sure. But after just a moment here, we should have a nice little report. Test error. There is significant debris. Okay. So all that debris I was warning you about, let me zoom in here. I ran right over it. And that's what happens if you run over some of the debris. But over here on the left, we have our report. And you've got each one of the runs here, and you can either click on them. I'm just going to scroll down with the arrow, and that runs through each one of the runs by zooming in on it. I'm going to go up to number 7, which was an error, and you can delete the run. And let's say we now have a gap, so I want to add one. I'm going to zoom out, fill in that gap, but I'm not. Looks like still it must have been hung up on the last one I created, so I want to Control Z, get rid of that wild diagonal line there. Let's see if I can get a proper replacement line now. Okay. Hit enter and I'll rerun the analysis after deleting that error line and replacing it with a new one. Okay, so now I can see on the report that I don't have any errors, but this screenshot here, which will be posted on the front page of the report, still shows the error. Now, if you just go over to the right side, and you can change your view. I like to show a little bit more of an isometric view, something that shows maybe a little bit of action in the background. I don't know, I'm getting too much into photography now, but I've changed the view, and if I hit screenshot, it is now changed to the view that we're seeing now, and doesn't have the error run anymore. So, does someone have a question? Yes. Yeah. I was just headed there. You're reading my mind. So these two options to show visual graph is a visualization of the actual run itself. So if I were to zoom in a bit on this top run here, you can see that the graph is blue and heads low, and that means that from the average elevation of that run, these measured points are lower than average, and it climbs back up towards the average, and now it turns red where the points are now higher than the average of the run. And this is a great visualization how you can see the rise and fall of the elevation down to the like thousandth of an inch on these runs. And again, yep, And then you can show measured locations, and this kind of gets a little messy by showing every point at every foot. But it is important to note that all of this follows the ASTM 1155 standard that you can see here under the floor flatness icon, which dictates measurements be taken at every foot. So just a way to show the customers, show the client that this is following the standard. But here are two options that can be checked on and off. And if I hit the screenshot button, they should appear now on the report. So if everything looks great for your report, let's see here. Oh, and you've got the overall flatness, minimum flatness, and levelness over here. These, I believe, are controlled. You can set those minimums, well, the criteria, you can set the criteria for the report in the settings. Not these settings. Let's see here. So if I create the report, here's that screenshot we took, showing us pass fail for our flatness and levelness. You can also put in dates, times, places for the inspections, and this is the graphs. So these are the graphs that are typically given as a deliverable by the FFFL inspection teams to their contractors. So these are what the clients, these are what the construction people are used to seeing. So I know when I've shown these simple little green graphs in the boardroom, this is when I've gotten a whole lot of, oh yeah, I've seen that before, and a lot of good reactions to these small little graphs. But I want to get back to, so this is a PDF report, again, that was not printed, but saved onto the desktop. If I reopen that, okay. So from the report window, if you go over to the report tab, this is where you can name the project, location, date, and then these are the criteria for levelness and flatness, and you can change these. It's dependent from project to project, but this is the criteria that will then give pass-fail on these printed reports that are saved to the desktop. So from the report tab is where the criteria is set by the user. So that is the floor flatness and levelness. Any questions about this ASTM standard, the graphs or reports before moving on to the wet concrete? Sean, any more good questions? All right, keep them coming though. Keep them coming. So again, I'm going to clear everything, give myself a clean slate with the edit and hit the broom button here. Give me a fresh start. So we'll go to the contextual view of wet concrete. All right, you can still see some of my work from this morning. I'll open up Builder and clean everything off. So I think this was a scan done by maybe Clinton Gray and Philip Lorenzo. Another great one to show people because it's got the crane pumping concrete. We got the workers. I think this is a great contextual scan. But then when we jump to the view here, we can really get some work done. So we've got the top view of this freshly poured slab of concrete, and we want to run the surface analysis. Now the Surface Wizard is great. That runs you through the debris filter and the heat map and the selection, but I'm going to walk you through just the heat map because for me, the heat map is the straight information. Wet concrete, this wet concrete icon, it's the same information, but it brings in this control option. So it gets a little complicated in trying to bring the point cloud to the correct elevation. But For this example and for the workshops, I've already elevation corrected this scan just so it's simpler and easier. But um, through the heat map here, this is all the information that is needed. So by hitting heat map, you get a little surface wizard telling you to pick your area. I'm just going to pick out the corners here. Again, trying to avoid large areas of debris. And then you hit enter to close the loop. And now you've got some settings to choose from. Uh, High-low is just showing the gradient from the high spots to low spots. If you hit this, you get into cut fill. And after showing you high-low, the description for cut fill is much simpler. So I'll describe that in detail in a moment. But right now we want high-low. Again, this is just the gradient from lowest to high. We'll set an interval at, this is in feet, so 1/100th of a foot is very important because that's darn near an eighth of an inch. So the two are virtually equal, so almost synonymous, but 100th of a foot, remember that, eighth of an inch. At the elevation mode, you get absolute and relative. Absolute elevation will display the actual elevations of the colors, and relative will just give an average and what's high or low. So we'll start with relative, and with the max, okay, so we'll start with the relative elevation, and now moving on to max number of coloring intervals, we've got that set at 1, so what that means is we'll have an average elevation which will display green. And if we set the number of coloring intervals to 1, that means it'll only display one color above average and one color below average. If this was set to 2, you would see 2 colors above and 2 colors below average. And I'll go through that here in just a moment. Uncheck base elevation because we're relative and we don't need to set that yet. So we've got a high-low, eighth of an inch intervals with only one above and below. I'll hit apply here, and what we'll see is green, red, and blue for the average, highs, and low spots. That is kind of what I was expecting, so confirm, and just like I had stated, uh, 0 inches is the absolute, no, is the relative average, and then anything above an eighth of an inch from the average is red, and anything below the average is blue. So to get a little more detail, a little more data, usable data out of this, I'll close that window. And to change this, settings, excuse me, not settings, edit, and from this drop-down tab, if we hit the only layer is the one we just created, so heat color map, and that brings up our options again. If we change this now to, let's go with 2 intervals here, and I'll just hit apply, you'll now see that there are 2 colors above, and I like to keep it at just 1 because as you'll see here, the computer kind of does an average between green and red, and it turns into this mushy, yucky color. You can tell the gradient with more detail, but I just don't like the way that all the colors kind of blend together, and it looks a little yucky. But that gives you the coloring options above and below. I want to change this now to cut and fill. So cut and fill is basically just showing you high spots and low spots, and that essentially means that your max number of coloring intervals is just 1. So by going to cut and fill and hitting apply, without changing the number of coloring intervals, you'll see now that it just has a high spot, low, and average. Again, so cut and fill is equivalent to having just, let's see, how do I want to say that? So cut and fill is equivalent to having 1 for your max number of coloring intervals. But for me, the best way to get some information for an FF, or not an FFFL test, excuse me. The best way to get information, specific information for a freshly poured slab is to go with high-low. 1/8 of an inch is typical industry standard for the interval. We want to go absolute elevation because the construction crews have a target elevation that they're pouring to, be it 10 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet for some of these skyscrapers. But this slab I have made, I have elevation adjusted to be at 100 feet. So our base elevation, this is our target, as you can think of the base elevation as the target for the pour. And with these settings right here, this is what I consider to be the best way to find if this slab has been poured correctly. In just a moment here. Okay, I left the coloring intervals off. Let's go to 1. Yeah, survey control. Okay, yeah, I'll get into that in just a second after explaining this. Thank you, Stephen. Um, so this was the options that I had set. Let me see here. That looks good. So this is the high-low at 1/8 of an inch, and the max number of coloring intervals being 1. So I just want to know what's out of tolerance, and that the 1 interval just shows me what's in and out of tolerance. Now, excuse me, I didn't want to hit that again, but it'll only take a moment. So the target being 100 feet, everything in green is great. Everything in red is outside of the 1/8 of an inch, 100th of a foot tolerance, and everything in blue is below the 1/8 of an inch tolerance. And then from here, it's as simple as measuring points, and you can go from these little support casings and do some down and out measurements that can then be quickly displayed, given to a team on site so they can now uh, cut out the high spots and fill in the lows. But now to get to Stephen's point about height adjusting the point clouds. So if the target is 100 feet, it's important that the point cloud is at the correct elevation. And we all know that the barometer inside of our scanners is about as accurate as the GPS. So it's going to be anywhere from, say, 5 to 10 feet. I would not want to trust the elevation of the scans that come in fresh. So what's typically done to height adjust is within Builder, you have this control, and you can choose, it's about finding checkerboard targets. So I haven't done this in a while, but there was a checkerboard target right here that was, used in the scan, and either a surveyor or a surveyor with a total station will, I don't know what to say here, measure that point to give the checkerboard an absolute elevation. When you use either one of these, well, not all these tools, but the grid offset, actually not the grid offset, that's for a different plane. The benchmark here, you will select the target, so you have the elevation that was given to you by the surveyor. You input that elevation into this target when the benchmark feature asks you to, and that elevation corrects the entire scan. So that way, when you know that your target for this slab is 100 feet, and you can get that information displayed to you right away. Because it may be perfectly flat, but if you poured it at the elevation of 99 and a half feet when your elevation is 100, that flat pour is no good, and that's why it's important and necessary to elevation adjust or elevation correct for these very accurate heat maps. But the heat map itself is the easy part, and let me see. I wish I had gone over this this benchmark and elevation correction, but I wanted to keep things especially simple for the AEC workshop. And I thought that was just a little bit, I don't know, a little bit extra. But if I go back over it, I may decide to include it in the workshops. So, did that mostly answer your question there, Stephen? Hmm. Okay. All right. So I'll add that to the lesson plan, and it's uh, I like that as well. It important. Okay. Yeah, that sounds like something I can create a good explanation for and pass throughout the team, so everyone will, yeah, will be prepared for that. Thank you. Elevation correction. All right. So uh, this is the rhythm apps. I just want to again make sure that everyone knows that I focus on the single scan workflow and being able to get these results in the field. For me, that's the what I've seen has gotten the greatest reaction out of people is when you eliminate registration and you're able to get results within minutes instead of having to go to the office, register, and get results that evening or the next day. And with that, are there any questions about the rhythm apps? Anything about ADA, FFFL, or the heat maps? Are you trying to get a report from the heat map? Um, yeah, uh, there's no report. Yeah. There's nothing to archive. Basically, what I was taught by Rithm, by Philip from Rithm, and then even the customers who use this is they just give this down and out measurements, and then yep, they tell the workers. The only reports are um, you don't create the report on fluid concrete. You create the report once it's set in stone. So, any other questions? Okay. Uh, I'll take your silence to be gold. I'll confirm the ADA slopes and pass that out to everyone. And then I'll also go over an explanation for the elevation correction. But I want to thank everyone for joining me here this morning. And I did see that a lot of you accepted the invitation for tomorrow's lesson. Tomorrow's lesson will just be the same material I offered 2 times just for convenience of scheduling. So you can feel free to join me and go over review everything again, but I will expect everyone I didn't see today to be here tomorrow. All right, you're very welcome, Sean. Thank you. All right. Yep. All right, everyone. You're very welcome. Have a great day. All right. Yes.